Chapter 1, Section 3, Basic Concepts of Democracy. Citizenship in a democracy. Democracy is not inevitable. It does not exist in the United States simply because Americans regard it as the best of all possible political systems. Rather, democracy exists in this country because the American people believe in its basic concepts. It will continue to exist only for as long as we, the people, continue to subscribe to those and practice those concepts. Winston Churchill once argued for democracy this way, quote, "No one pretends that democracy is perfect or all-wise. Indeed, it has been said that democracy is the worst form of government except all those other forms that have been tried from time to time." End quote. The American concept of democracy rests on these basic notions. 1. A recognition of the fundamental worth and dignity of every person. 2. A respect for the equality of all persons. 3. A faith in majority rule and an insistence upon minority rights. 4. An acceptance of the necessity of compromise. And 5. An insistence upon the widest possible degree of individual freedom. These ideas form the very minimum that anyone who believes in democracy must agree to. Democracy is firmly based upon the belief in the fundamental importance of the individual. Each individual, no matter what his or her station in life, is a separate and distinct being. This concept of the dignity and worth of the individual is of overriding importance in democratic thought. At various times, of course, the welfare of one or of a few individuals is subordinated to the interests of the many in a democracy. People can be forced to do certain things whether they want to or not. Examples range from paying taxes to registering for the draft to stopping at a stop sign. When a democratic society forces people to pay a tax or obey traffic signals, it is serving the interests of the many. However, it is not simply serving the interests of a mass of people who happen to outnumber the few. Rather, it is serving the many who, as individuals, together make up that society. Hand in hand with the belief in the worth of the individual, democracy stresses the equality of all individuals. It holds with Jefferson that, quote, "all men are created equal," end quote. Certainly, democracy does not insist on an equality of condition for all persons. Thus, it does not claim that all are born with the same mental or physical abilities, nor does it argue that all persons have a right to have an equal share of worldly goods. Rather, the democratic concept of equality insists that all are entitled to 1. Equality of opportunity, and 2. Equality before the law. That is, the democratic concept of equality holds that no person should be held back for any arbitrary reasons, such as those based on race, color, religion, or gender. The concept holds that each person must be free to develop himself or herself as fully as he or she can or cares to, and that each person should be treated as the equal of all other persons by the law. We have come a great distance towards the goal of equality for all in this country. It is clear, however, that the journey is far from over. In a democracy, the will of the people, and not the dictate of the ruling few, determines public policy. But what is the popular will, and how is it determined? Some device must exist by which these critical questions can be answered. The only satisfactory device democracy knows is that of majority rule. Democracy argues that a majority of the people will be right more often than they will be wrong, and that the majority will also be right more often than will any one person or small group. Democracy can be described as an experiment or a trial and error process designed to find satisfactory ways to order human relations. Democracy does not say that the majority will always arrive at the best decisions on public matters. In fact, the democratic process does not intend to come up with right or best answers. Rather, the democratic process searches for satisfactory solutions to public problems. Of course, democracy insists that the majority's decision will usually be more rather than less satisfactory. Democracy does admit the possibility of mistakes. It acknowledges the possibility that wrong or less satisfactory answers will sometimes be found. Democracy also recognizes that seldom is any solution to a public problem so satisfactory that it cannot be improved upon, and that circumstances can change over time. So the process of experimentation, of seeking answers to public questions, is never ending. Certainly, a democracy cannot work without the principle of majority rule. Unchecked, however, a majority could destroy its opposition and in the process destroy democracy as well. Thus, democracy insists upon majority rule restrained by minority rights. The majority must always recognize the right of any minority to become, by fair and lawful means, the majority. The majority must also be willing to listen to a minority's argument, to hear its objections, to bear its criticisms, and to welcome its suggestions. In a democracy, public decision-making must be largely a matter of give and take among the various competing interests. It is a matter of compromise in order to find the position most acceptable to the largest number. Compromise is the process of blending and adjusting competing views and interests. Compromise is an essential part of the democratic concept for two major reasons. First, remember that democracy puts the individual first and at the same time insists that each individual is the equal of all others. In a democratic society made up of many individuals and groups with many different opinions and interests, how can the people make public decisions except by compromise? Second, few public questions have only two sides. Most can be answered in several ways. Take the apparent simple question of how a city should pay for the paving of a public street. Should it charge those who own property along the street? Or should the cost be paid for from the city's general treasury? Or should the city and the adjacent property owners share the costs? What about those who will use the street but do not live in the city? Should they have to pay a toll? Remember, compromise is a process, a way of achieving majority agreement. It is never an end in itself. Not all compromises are good, and not all are necessary. It should be clear by this point that democracy can thrive only in an atmosphere of individual freedom. However, democracy does not and cannot insist on complete freedom for the individual. Absolute freedom can exist only in a state of anarchy, the total absence of government. Anarchy can only lead inevitably and quickly to rule by the strong and ruthless. Democracy does insist, however, that each individual must be as free to do as he or she pleases as far as the freedom of all will allow. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes once had this to say about the relative nature of each individual's rights. Quote, "The right to swing my fist ends where the other man's nose begins." End quote. Drawing the line between the rights of one individual and those of another is far from easy. Still, the drawing of that line is a continuous and vitally important function of a democratic government. As John F. Kennedy put it, quote, "The rights of every man are diminished when the rights of one man are threatened." End quote. Striking the proper balance between freedom of the individual and the rights of society as a whole is similarly difficult and vital. Abraham Lincoln once stated democracy's problem in these words, quote, "Must a government of necessity be too strong for the liberties of its own people, or too weak to maintain its own existence?" End quote. Human beings desire both liberty and authority. Democratic government must work constantly to strike the proper balance between the two. The authority of government must be adequate to the needs of society. At the same time, that authority must never be allowed to become so great that it restricts the individual beyond necessity. The American commitment to freedom for the individual is deep-rooted, and it is as evident in the nation's economic system as it is in the political system. The American economic system is often called the free enterprise system. The free enterprise system is an economic system characterized by private or corporate ownership of capital goods, investments that are determined by private decisions rather than by state control, and determined in a free market. The free enterprise system is based on four fundamental factors: private ownership, individual initiative, profit, and competition. The free enterprise system is often called capitalism, and it is also known as the private enterprise system and as a market-based system. It does not rely on government to decide what items are to be produced, how much of any particular item should be produced, or how much any item is to sell for. Rather, those decisions are to be made by the market through the law of supply and demand. That law states that when supplies of goods and services become plentiful, prices tend to drop. When supplies become scarcer, prices tend to rise. Democracy and the free enterprise system are not the same thing. One is a political system and the other is a democratic system. However, both are firmly based on the concept of individual freedom. America's experience with both systems clearly suggests that the two reinforce one another in practice. The basis of the American economic system is the free market. However, government plays a role in the American economy and always has. An economy in which private enterprise exists in combination with a considerable amount of government regulation and promotion is called a mixed economy. Government's participation in the economy serves a twofold purpose: to protect the public and preserve private enterprise. Government's participation in the economy can be seen at every level in this country: national, state, and local. Here are but a few examples. Economic activities are regulated by government through antitrust laws, pure food and drug laws, anti-pollution standards, and city and county zoning ordinances and building codes. The nation's economic life is promoted in a great number of public ways. The government grants money for transportation systems, scientific research, and the growing of particular food crops, builds roads, and operates public schools, provides services such as the postal system, weather reports, and a national currency, and much more. Thus, some activities that might be carried out privately are in fact conducted by government. Public education, the postal system, local fire departments, city bus systems, and road building are examples of long standing. How much should government participate, regulate, and promote, police, and serve? Many of the most heated debates in American politics centers on that question, and we often are reminded of Abraham Lincoln's advice. Quote, "The legitimate object of government is to do for a community of people whatever they need to have done, but cannot do at all, or can do not so well for themselves in their separate and individual capacities." End quote. Most Americans believe that a well-regulated free enterprise system, one of free choice, individual initiative, private enterprise, is the best guarantee of a better life for everyone. The Internet provides a prime example of how the U.S. government fosters technological innovations. The Net was born in 1969 in the Defense Department when its Advanced Research Projects Agency built a 4-computer network to enable its scientists to communicate more effectively with one another. Further developed by the private sector, the Internet enables more than 50 million Americans to send and receive email, to buy or sell practically anything, and to entertain and inform themselves. Democracy demands that the people be widely informed about their government. Thus, democracy and the Internet would seem to be made for one another. Once online, anyone can access a huge amount of information about public affairs. Internet users can check out the websites of political candidates, find out what's happening on the floor of Congress, and read about recent Supreme Court decisions. Theoretically, this makes knowledgeable participation in the democratic process easier than ever before. However, the speed with which the quantity in which information can be found on the World Wide Web does not guarantee the reliability of that data. Experience shows that there is a vast amount of unverified, often unverifiable, and frequently false information in cyberspace. Citizens must take responsibility for checking the reliability of the sources they use. Every fact or quote found online should be checked against a second, independent source whenever possible. What effect is this easy access of information likely to have on democracy? Many people believe that voters will soon be able to cast their ballots online or even to vote directly on issues. Arizona first experimented with online voting in the 2000 Democratic presidential primary, and other states are exploring the possibilities. A leap to online elections appears unlikely to us today, particularly since it would entail moving from representative to direct democracy. It seems clear, however, that those who choose to can now be better informed on the issues they care about.